Hello, all. This is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk to you about what does business school actually teach you. So if you don't know me, I'm a professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out to get through my own higher education that I decided to pay the favor forward and do something about it. All right, so most people understand or think about business school as a way or a training ground to actually make money. And I don't think that's necessarily the true way to understand a business school. That sort of general understanding of what business school is all about, that you go there and all of a sudden you're going to make a ton of money, is not necessarily the way that we view things. So professors and the people that are actually doing the teaching and all that kind of stuff, that's not necessarily the way that we understand how business school actually works. And that's not the way that I would really like people to view business school either. The key thing with business school is that it is trying to teach you a little bit about how markets and how organizations actually work. They're very different. They're very unique. So markets, for example, this is when you have a buyer and a seller and they match up together. And then they trade some sort of good. Maybe there's an exchange of money when there is that market. And then organizations is how, how we might sort of manage individuals. There might not necessarily be an exchange of goods that are happening or exchange of some sort of product that's happening or service within the organization, but we might sort of think about maybe decision making that happens within an organization, or how information flows within an organization. And sometimes, the sort of technical term that people might have referred to that is that hierarchy. But that's another story. I'm not going to get into that. So basically what we're looking for is, or looking to sort of help you understand, is how people might actually fulfill their desires, right? How they actually get things done that they want to get done, and how they might work together to get those things done, right? So fulfill those particular desires that they have. So we all have desires. We all want to do stuff in our life. And we want to make sure that we as society, and sometimes we think about society, and sometimes we think about the particular business, and sometimes we think about individuals, how they actually can get things done that they want to get done, and do so such that many people sort of see the value of the thing that they're trying to get done, right? And that's an important thing to think about. It's not necessarily, it's critically important to understand it's not necessarily about money. And we're not trying to get you to sort of go out there and be as greedy as possible and to accumulate as much wealth as possible. Although, wealth is not a bad thing, and having wealth is not a bad thing, and going out and pursuing sort of financial means, or getting financial means, or getting an improved salary, a larger salary, that's not a bad thing in any sort of way. That's actually a really good thing. That means you're providing value in the marketplace somehow, somewhere, and people are willing to pay you for that particular value. But the critical thing is, you could be doing anything that you want to be doing, and you can apply some of the stuff that we understand businesses, or how businesses actually operate. And then we're trying to fulfill those things. So if you want to work in a not-for-profit, for example, you can actually work in a not-for-profit and apply a lot of this kind of stuff. If you're trying to help out some really strange marketplace that is not necessarily considered legitimate. Maybe it is thinking about how people, how kids, those Pokemon cards that they have at school. Maybe you want to understand how children are trading Pokemon cards, and why they actually see value in different Pokemon cards. So we might sort of think about that, and you can apply some of the knowledge there. No, a lot of people are not going to say that there's much value there, but some people might see value in that, particularly if you're going into elementary school education. You want to understand how people are motivated to trade those Pokemon cards. Or you might want to understand, so for example, the organ market, right? So how is it that people are actually how do different organ markets, so human organs, how are they actually, how does that operate? What are we supposed to do? How are we understanding the different institutions behind the sort of human organ market? And we might sort of think about that kind of stuff. And that's an important thing to think about. Some of the stuff that you understand in business can actually be applied in those particular areas. And it's really important when we talk about that kind of stuff to not only talk about, the business itself and human desires. We also want to talk about things like institutions, for example. So making sure that we have the rules and regulations and laws, and maybe different sort of informal institutions or formal institutions like the church, for example. The church broadly, and I'm sort of being inclusive with that, mosques and all the different kind of religions out there. That there's really important things to think about, and these institutions do matter with all of these different areas and how businesses operate and how we fulfill our desires. Because at the end of the day, our desires are motivated largely by a lot of people's desires around the world are motivated by our religious influence or sort of morality that we have. That's an important thing. So in terms of how we understand business school or what business school teaches you, it really is trying to get you to understand how you actually can fulfill your desires and work together with other people such that you can fulfill those particular desires. Now, there's differences in sort of, and this is my own personal views and how this sort of operates. So an undergraduate business education is going to be different than an MBA, for example, Master's of Business Administration, is going to be different from a doctorate, a PhD, in many different ways. So an undergraduate business education, they're going to be really focused on the basics of sort of the education that you're going to get and how organizations operate and markets operate. So there's going to be sort of foundational stuff about education, about accounting, for example, finance, just kind of understanding how that stuff works. And just understanding key concepts, for example, in marketing and in strategy and stuff like that, and how they all interlink, and sort of getting a basic understanding of all these different key constructs that are out there. And constructs are just like, sort of business jargon, but not really business jargon. We don't like to go into those kind of areas, but how we can view the world or what the education has gotten to at this point, or sort of the research has gotten to at this point. And in an undergraduate education is really different compared to a graduate education, is that the view of how we understand the world is a lot more what I would say is determinant, right? That there are these fixed things in the world, and these fixed things can't be changed, and they can't be influenced. And this is the way that we understand the world, and it's not going to change all that much. This is a sort of state of what we know, and that state of what we know is determinate. It doesn't change at all, or indeterminate, I guess. It doesn't change at all. Then you might get into a Master's of Business Administration or a master's program in a business school, and those are going to be stretching your limits a little bit more. So generally, what is preferred in those kind of programs in an MBA program is that you've worked for a while, you kind of understand that, things are a little bit fuzzier than what we sort of would view when you read it in a textbook, right? That it's not necessarily all that clear. We might have an understanding how international business works, or we have sort of these different strategies for international business, and we might do this particular foreign direct investment, and we have to do these kind of things. But when you actually get out there and work for a little bit, and you sort of understand that there's nuances in every single industry and every single business, that there's really unique differences between every business out there and every single market, that you just understand a lot more richness, and you understand that there's lots more fuzziness that happens. That this fuzziness does matter, or the ambiguities of life does matter. And the other thing that's important, I think, that you gain after you've been working for 5, 6, 7 years, is that you understand that getting things done is about you actually getting those things done, right? Like it doesn't necessarily, things don't get done just because somebody else is getting those things done, or you're not kind of like this bystander in life. you're actually getting out there and you're actually doing those things. And once you learn that skill, that's important to talk about it in the classroom, right? And using the frameworks or sort of understanding that we have as business school professors, we might sort of have a different take on things, and we might want to frame those. So it's going to be more discussion based. There's going to be a lot more discussion that happens in the classroom about people sharing their experiences of what is happening in their businesses. And then what you end up doing is having a framework, or the business professor or whoever's teaching the particular classes, they're going to be framing the discussion a little bit and going deep into, maybe it's this accounting topic. And then, hopefully that there's 2 or 3 people that have an understanding of that, from what they have done in their business, in their own businesses and their own experiences, so they can talk about it and have a discussion about it. And that's why it's really important in a lot of business schools, particularly the major ones that we know, they emphasize, case studies, for example, at that stage, because these case studies are really rich, in-depth kind of understandings of the way that the world works. Some of them are, 30 pages of single-space typing, and they just go really in-depth. And at the end of it, what you get a feeling for is there's not really a right answer with getting things done. There's a better answer. There's a preferred answer of getting things done, but it's not as clear as one would think in terms of when you have an undergraduate education, you have like the right answer and it jumps out on you, right? So there's going to be a lot more emphasis that things are a little bit more fuzzier than we would like, but there's always still a little bit of a better answer than what you would, when you're going through this kind of stuff. There's always a little bit more of a better answer than not a better answer. I don't know what I'm trying to say here. All right. So, and then finally, with a PhD or doctorate in business education or business administration, is that you're really taking the view that you're constructing this knowledge and you are trying to see what's actually going on in the marketplace and in businesses, and trying to understand what's really going on and bringing in some of that nuances. So sometimes what ends up happening, this happens a fair bit with people that are studying, different aspects of business, is they are teaching a class and then a student says, well, that's kind of peculiar. I didn't really understand why that was happening, because in my business, we do this. And then we kind of discover like, oh, that's really interesting. I never thought about that. And then we might pursue that particular thing and go into it and discover, oh, this is actually a bigger phenomenon. This is something that's really taking off and becoming much more important. And so we should study that and discover what's actually going on. And once we have that knowledge, we like to sort of write it up in a paper and present it. And then that knowledge gets sort of shared with other professors and other people. And then they go out and maybe they actually talk about it in their classroom, right? And share some of that insight with the undergraduate students and master students. And so there's a lot more free flow at that moment in that when you're doing a PhD or you're doing a doctorate, it's a lot more about discovery and search. Rather than sort of memorizing specific facts. You have to understand these specific facts and you have to understand all of that kind of stuff. But there's a large component of discovery that you go through in going into different sort of interesting areas that we would never have thought about before. And there's lots and lots of different interesting areas. Knowledge is infinite. We're never running out of different things to study and going into different rabbit holes. There's so much stuff to study. And there's so many interesting things that we can get into. We can keep digging deep into particular areas and study that for years and years and years. And we're never going to run out of stuff to study. Anybody that suggests that we've run out of all the ideas out there has never really done a lot of research in a particular area, because it is really, really messy when you start getting into that kind of stuff and you're going into search. So that's the key things when you are going into a business school, or what they're trying to teach you is, how do you actually fulfill particular desires that you have? So how do you actually identify these particular desires that you have? How do you fulfill those? How do you actually execute on those things? And how do you get other people to sort of see these kind of things that you're doing and move forward with those particular things, or get people to do that sort of fulfill their own desires or motivate people to fulfill those particular desires. And there's all sorts of different takes on that, right? So you can look at it from a maybe it's organizational behavior. So you're looking at sort of psychological perspectives, and you want to see, well, how do people actually come up with their desires? What motivates people to, follow a different leader or follow different leaders, and what are the characteristics of some kind of leaders out there? Different things like that. You might look at maybe from an accounting perspective, where you might look at the different rules and regulations and how people actually fulfill these kind of desires that we have. Or maybe you're looking at it from a financial perspective, where you're looking at, okay, over the course of 10, 20 years, how do we build up over time? How do we get the wealth that we've accumulated from fulfilling these desires and providing value in the marketplace? What do we do with that? How do we actually grow that particular entity, right? And there's so many different questions and so many different takes on it. It's a really fascinating sort of journey when you do the business school education, where you are going and just really digging deep in how organizations and markets and institutions actually work, and they all function together to get something done so that we can create this big thing, this big wonderful thing that we live in, and actually accomplish some things in the world around us. All right, so hopefully you like this video. Hopefully it answers your question, what does business school actually teach you? And then I went into as well, what are the differences in business school, undergraduate business school education, to a master's and MBA in business administration, and then, a PhD in business administration. So if you like this video, again, give me a thumbs up. I do appreciate it. It's awesome that you do that. And do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Take care. Bye.